a fist slammed into the side of a wooden cage. The wood cracked. Inside, something whimpered and pressed itself flat against the boards. A boot kicked the cage hard enough to tip it sideways. The animal inside didn't fight back. It didn't growl. It just lay there with one ear torn and ribs showing under matted gray fur. A man with a thick neck spat into the dirt and said the thing was already dead. He just hadn't bothered to bury it yet. Then a small voice cut through the noise. A girl, no older than 12, stepped out from behind a rusted feed barrel with 5 crumpled dollar bills clutched tight in her hand. Her name was Wren. And what that half-dead wolf did 7 days later left every grown man in that town speechless. How does a dying animal do the impossible? Stay with me on this one. The girl with the 5 crumpled bills was Wren Calloway. She lived 3 miles out of town in a leaning farmhouse with her grandmother Hattie. Both her parents had been gone almost 4 years. A logging truck on a wet road. Wren remembered her father's hands more than his face by now. He had been a man who trained working dogs, and he had taught her one thing above everything else. Animals don't trust your words. They trust how still you can sit. They trust what you do when nothing is happening. Hattie was 73 and tired in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. Her hands shook in the morning. Her medicine cost more than they had most weeks. Wren did the dishes. Wren fed the chickens. Wren walked the long path into town for groceries. And Wren, when no one was watching, dropped every quarter and dime she could find into a coffee tin under her bed. $5.27. That's what was in the tin the morning Wren walked past the back lot of Tully's feed store and saw the cage. She knew Tully by reputation. Everyone did. He ran a small operation that he called pest control. What he actually did was trap whatever was unlucky enough to wander too close to the ranches. Coyotes, bobcats, sometimes worse. He sold the pelts. Sometimes he sold the animals to men who liked to do things with them that nobody talked about in church. Tully was not a kind man. The cage that morning held something Wren had never seen up close. A wolf, gray, long-bodied, one ear shredded. He was lying on his side. His ribs moved, but only barely. A heavy chain ran from his back leg to a steel post, like he'd come in fighting and they'd taken no chances. He wasn't fighting now. Tully was leaned against the wall of the feed store with 2 other men. He saw Wren staring and grinned. He told her the wolf was already dead. He just hadn't shoveled it under yet. He said if she wanted it, he'd take $5 and let her drag it home herself. He was joking. Mostly. Wren stood very still. Her father had taught her that too. Don't react fast. Watch. She watched the wolf. The wolf watched her back. It was the first time he'd opened his eyes all morning. Tully didn't notice. The 2 other men didn't notice. But that wolf and that girl held a look between them that had no words in it, and a great many words at the same time. Wren pulled the coffee tin's worth of coins and bills out of her coat pocket. She had counted it 3 times that morning before she left the house. She set $5 in single on the wooden ledge of the feed store. She kept the 27 cents. Tully laughed, then stopped laughing when he realized she was serious. He told her she was being foolish. He told her the animal would be dead before sundown. Wren said nothing. She simply asked him to help her pull the cage onto the small wagon she used to carry sacks of feed for the chickens. Tully refused. He thought it would be funnier to watch her try. She tried. She failed twice. Her hands shook. The cage was heavier than she expected. The third time, the youngest of the 3 men, a thin boy who couldn't have been 17, set down his cup of coffee and walked over. He didn't speak to Tully. He didn't ask permission. He just lifted one end of the cage and helped Wren slide it onto her wagon. He looked at her once fast and looked away. Tully called him a fool under his breath. The boy didn't answer. Wren walked the whole 3 miles home, pulling that wagon. She had to stop 6 times. The sun was setting when she pulled into the yard. Hattie came out onto the porch with a hand pressed against her own chest and looked at the cage on the wagon and said only one word. She said no. Wren said yes. Hattie turned around and walked back into the house and shut the door behind her. The latch clicked. Wren stood in the yard with a wolf that wouldn't last the night, a chain she didn't have a key for, $5 gone, and the certain knowledge that she had just done the most important thing of her short life. She got to work. The wolf didn't move when she pushed the cage into the barn. He didn't move when she put hay around him. He didn't move when she set water in a bowl 6 inches from his nose. The chain was bolted into the floor of the cage. She didn't have a key. She didn't try to take it off. She had the sense not to push him. She named him Ash. Not because of his color. Because of something her father once said. A working dog needs a name that fits in the mouth easy and short. Ash fit. The first night, she stayed in the barn with him. She sat on a hay bale 10 feet away. She didn't speak. She didn't approach. Her father had told her once that wild animals don't fear humans the way humans think they do. They fear sudden movement. They fear loud voices. They fear being looked at directly for too long. So she didn't look at him directly. She sat with her side turned to him and watched him out of the corner of her eye and let him watch her. He watched her for 2 hours and then he slept. Day 2. Hattie wouldn't come out. She had not spoken since the moment she said no. Wren made breakfast. She brought a slice of bread to the barn. She left it on the hay near the cage. She did not stay to see if he ate it. The slice was still there at noon. It was still there at sundown. She did not take it back. Day 3 was when she started to lose hope. The wolf had not eaten. He had not drunk. His eyes had gone glassy. His breath was coming shallow. She had read about wolves in the encyclopedia at school. She knew that an animal that didn't drink for 3 days in this kind of heat was an animal who had decided. She sat in the corner of the barn, and she cried for the first time since she'd brought him home. Quietly, with her face in her knees. She didn't know how to do this. She didn't know how to save anything. It was then that her father's voice came back to her. Not in words, just a feeling. Something she remembered watching him do once with a dog that had been beaten so badly that nobody else would touch it. He had not approached the dog. He had not spoken to the dog. He had simply gone about his business in the same room as the dog every day for 9 days, until the dog had come over to him on the dog's own time. He used to say the same thing to her again and again. You can't save an animal that doesn't want you. You can only sit close enough that wanting becomes possible. So Wren stopped trying to save him. She brought a tin cup of water and set it down a foot from his nose, and she walked away. She came back 2 hours later. The water hadn't moved. She sat on the hay bale with her back to him, and she opened her school book and she read out loud. A history chapter. About a war. About men who had marched 1,000 miles and somehow not died. She read for an hour. Her voice was small. Her voice did not crack. She was reading for him, but she was also reading for herself, and the wolf could hear the difference. Day 4. The same. The water uncrossed. The bread untouched. She read out loud again. This time she read poems. She did not know much poetry. She read what she had. She read it badly. The wolf, when she snuck a glance, was watching her now. Not with distance. with something closer to attention. That afternoon, Hattie came out onto the porch. She did not come down to the barn, but she stood there and she watched. She did not speak to Wren. She watched for a long time, and then she went back inside. That evening, there was stew on the table that there had not been any plan to make. It was day 4 late, when Wren went into the barn for the last time of the night and saw something that made her stop in the doorway. The tin cup of water had been moved. Not knocked over. Moved. Pulled closer to his face. The water level was lower. There was a wet spot on his muzzle. She closed her eyes very hard so she would not make any sudden movement. She took 2 steps in and sat down on the hay bale and turned her face away. He was watching her. She could feel it. She did not turn to look. She picked up the school book and she opened to a page she had never read. She started reading out loud again. Just a math chapter. Numbers. Word problems. Boring as a fence post. She read for 40 minutes. And then, very slowly, she heard a sound she had not heard in 4 days. His tongue. Lapping at the cup. Slow. Once. Twice. 3 times. Quiet. Like he didn't want her to know. She kept reading. She did not stop. She did not look. She read until the cup was empty. She read until the sound stopped. Then she very gently, without facing him, set the book down. She told him in the smallest voice she had that she'd see him in the morning. Then she walked back to the house and she shut herself in the bathroom and she put a towel against her mouth and she made a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob and she stayed there for 10 whole minutes. That night she slept for the first time since the cage had come home. She thought she had won. She thought the worst was behind her. She had no idea, lying there in the quiet of her grandmother's house, that a man named Tully was sitting in his shed 3 miles away, and that he had just heard a piece of news from a bartender that was about to change his mind about a $5 deal. Day 5. Morning. The sun had been up about an hour. A truck engine cut through the quiet of the yard. Loud. Too fast. Tires on gravel. 2 doors slamming. Then a third. Wren was in the barn refilling the cup. She froze. She heard Tully's voice. Then another man. Then her grandmother's voice, raised, sharp, the way Hattie sounded when she was scared and trying to hide it. Wren stepped out of the barn into the yard. 3 men. Tully in the middle. One she didn't know. And the boy from before, the thin one who had helped her load the cage. The boy was standing a step behind the other 2. He wasn't looking at her. Tully smiled. He was not pleased. He was performing. He told her there'd been a misunderstanding. He told her that the wolf had not actually been his to sell. He said it had been signed over to him by the county for disposal, and disposal meant disposal, and a girl walking off with a county-marked animal was not actually allowed under the law. He said he was here to take it back. He said he was being generous, because by rights he could call the sheriff. He held out a $10 bill. He said this would settle them up. Wren did not take the bill. She told him no. Tully's smile changed. He walked past her. He walked past Hattie. He walked into the barn. Wren followed him because she had to. She couldn't stop him. He was twice her size, and there were 2 more behind him. He stopped in front of the cage. He looked down at Ash. Ash was lying on his side, breathing, alive, a small wet spot still on the corner of his muzzle. Tully stared at him for a long time. And then his face changed. The performance went away. What was left was something colder. Wren saw it. She understood, without anyone telling her, that Tully had walked in here expecting to find a corpse. He had been making excuses to himself for 5 days about why he hadn't come back to bury it. The truth was he had not wanted to. He was the kind of man who left things to die, because actually killing them took something he did not have. And now here was an animal he had written off, alive in a child's barn, drinking from a tin cup, and somewhere in his small mind that fact felt like an insult. Tully turned to the man next to him. He said the words she had been afraid of. He said, "Get the cage." Hattie came down the steps. She came faster than a woman of her age should have been able to come. She grabbed at Tully's arm. She told him this was a child's animal and to leave it be. Tully did not even look at her. He shoved her back with the heel of his hand. Hattie went down. Hard. Her hip hit the dirt. Wren ran to her grandmother. She knelt in the dirt. She felt Hattie's wrist. She felt the pulse under her fingers, fast and thready. Hattie was talking, but she was not making sense. The other man and Tully picked up the cage. Ash didn't fight. Ash couldn't fight. They walked the cage out of the barn and slid it into the bed of Tully's truck. The chain dragged behind it. The boy stood by the truck. He looked at Wren on the ground, holding her grandmother. He looked at the cage. He didn't move. Tully snapped his fingers at him, and the boy got in the truck. The door slammed. The engine turned. Gravel sprayed. They were gone in under a minute. Wren held her grandmother in the dirt. Hattie's eyes came back to her after maybe 30 seconds. She told her she was all right. Her voice was thin. She wasn't all right. But she was alive. Wren got her up. Got her into the house. Got her into the chair. Brought her water. Brought her the medicine that should have run out 2 days ago, because it had run out 2 days ago, and the bottle was empty and Wren just stood there holding it. Hattie told her to sit down. Hattie told her to leave it. Hattie told her that the wolf was gone. That Tully would do what Tully would do. That Wren was a child, and there was nothing a child could do. Wren listened. She nodded. She sat down. She brought her grandmother more water. She heated soup. She made sure Hattie was warm. She waited until Hattie's eyes closed and her breathing went even. Then she went into the kitchen. She took down a small wooden box from the top of the pantry. Inside the box was a pocket knife with a bone handle. It had belonged to her grandfather. She put it in her coat pocket. She walked out the back door. She did not take the wagon. She did not leave a note. She walked across the field, into the tree line, and she started the 6-mile walk to the place where Tully lived. If you're still with me on this, and I'd like you to be, because what comes next is going to stay with you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This story is just turning, and there's a long way to go. She walked through the woods because the road would have been seen. She walked through the brush because brush was harder to track. She knew these woods. She had walked these woods with her father when she was 8 years old. She knew the creek. She knew the deer paths. She knew the long way around that came out behind Tully's shed. It took her 2 hours. She got there just before dark. Tully's place was a sad collection of rotting wood and rusted things piled in a clearing in the trees. There was the main shack. There was a shed. There was a smaller pen with chicken wire and a tarp over the top of it. The truck was parked in the gravel. The cage with Ash inside was not in the truck anymore. They had moved it. Wren saw it through the trees. They had set it inside the smaller pen, the one with the tarp over the top. They had thrown a heavy canvas over the front of the cage so the wolf couldn't see out. A light was on in the main shack. Voices. Tully and at least one other man. Laughing about something. Wren came out of the trees on the far side of the pen. She stayed low. She crawled under the lowest strand of the chicken wire. She crawled to the cage. She lifted the canvas a few inches. Ash was awake. His eyes met hers. His tail did not move. His body did not move. But something in his eyes moved. He recognized her. After everything, he recognized her. She started working on the latch with the pocket knife. She had not thought through this part. The latch was secured with a small padlock. Cheap, old, but a padlock. The pocket knife was not going to break a padlock. She could hear her own heart hammering in her ears. She tried the hinge instead. The hinges were old, rusted. She started working at the pin of the lower hinge. It was budging. Slowly, the voices in the shack got louder. A door opened. Heavy footsteps. Tully had come outside. He saw her. He stopped where he stood. The smile he gave her then was not human in any way that mattered. He walked toward the pen. He did not hurry. He told her in a slow voice that she had just saved him a trip. Saved him having to come find her tomorrow. He had been thinking, he said, that maybe she had seen too much. Maybe a girl with too much sense and too much mouth needed to be reminded that people like her grandmother lived alone in old houses that could go up like dry kindling. He stepped into the pen. The pocket knife was small in Wren's hand. She held it out anyway. Her hand was shaking. She was 12 years old. Tully laughed. And then Ash did the impossible thing. He stood up. He had not stood for a week. He had not stood since before the trap had taken his back leg. There was no clinical reason for him to be able to stand now. He stood anyway. He walked in the cage, the 4 steps to the front. He pressed his shoulder against the broken lower hinge that Wren had been working at. The hinge cracked. The whole front of the cage tilted forward. Ash stepped out into the pen. Tully froze. He had brought no gun. He had not thought he would need a gun. He had thought he was coming out to scare a child. Ash did not run at him. Ash did not bare his teeth. Ash walked slowly, with a heavy limp on his back leg, until he stood between the man and the girl. And then he stopped. And he looked at Tully. That look did something to Tully. He went pale. He took a step back. The wolf did not move. The wolf just looked. His eyes had nothing in them but quiet. There was a long moment. Tully went for the pen gate. He did not turn his back on the wolf. He stepped sideways, slowly, the way a man steps away from something he has finally understood. Tully got out of the pen. He shouted for the men inside the shack. The other man came out. Drunk. Confused. He saw the wolf standing free in the pen. He raised a rifle that had been leaning by the door. The boy came out behind him. The boy saw Wren. The boy saw the wolf. The boy saw the rifle. The boy took 2 steps and put his hand on the barrel of the rifle and pushed it down toward the dirt. Tully turned on the boy. Started to scream at him. The boy did not back up. He told Tully he was done. He told Tully he had been done since the morning Tully shoved an old woman in the dirt. He told Tully if he raised that rifle 1 more inch, the boy would walk straight to the sheriff and tell him every single thing that had ever happened in that shack. The other man with the rifle looked at the boy. Looked at Tully. Looked at the wolf, still standing, still silent, still between Tully and the girl. The man slowly let go of the rifle and stepped back. Tully cursed. He cursed the boy. He cursed the wolf. He cursed Wren. He told her to take her dog and get off his land before he changed his mind. Wren stepped past Ash. She picked up the pocket knife. She walked slowly out of the pen. Ash walked with her. He did not walk behind her. He did not walk in front of her. He walked at her side, his shoulder almost touching her hip, his eyes on Tully the entire way to the road. When they reached the road, Ash's legs went out from under him. He went down hard. Wren knelt in the dirt of the road. She put her arms under him. He weighed almost as much as she did. She lifted him. She carried him. She carried him 6 miles in the dark. She did not put him down once. She got home a little before midnight. Hattie was awake. Hattie had been pacing the kitchen. Hattie had been about to call the sheriff herself. When Wren came through the door with the wolf in her arms, Hattie sat down hard in the kitchen chair, and she did not say anything for almost a full minute. Then she got up, and she opened the door to the back room, and she pointed. She told Wren to put him in there. On the rug. On the good rug. The rug Hattie had hand-knotted 30 years ago. Wren looked at her grandmother. Hattie looked back. There was something in her grandmother's face that Wren had not seen there since before her parents died. It was something soft. Something that had been gone for a long time. She put Ash on the rug. Hattie did not sleep that night. Wren did not sleep either. They sat together on either side of the wolf, and they wrapped him in old blankets, and they trickled water onto his tongue from a teaspoon. By morning, he was breathing easier. By the next afternoon, he had eaten a strip of chicken from Wren's hand. Slowly, one bite, then a second. The boy came 2 days later. His name turned out to be Eli. He had a black eye Wren had not seen the first night, and a bag of dog food that he had bought with his own money. He stood on the porch a long time before he knocked. When Hattie opened the door, he started to apologize, and Hattie cut him off and told him to come in for breakfast. He sat at the table and he ate 2 plates of eggs, and he didn't speak for most of it. Then he asked if there was anything he could do. Hattie thought about it for a moment. She told him there was a fence on the west pasture that needed mending, and a man's hands would help. Eli came back the next day with a bag of nails. And the day after that. And the day after that. Tully did not come back. Word went around town that he had packed up his shack and moved 2 counties over by the end of the week. Some people said the boy had told the sheriff things. Some people said Tully was running from worse than that. Most people just said good riddance and didn't ask too many questions. Wren did not ask either. Tully was gone. That was enough. The vet came on the 8th day. He was a small, careful man named Dr. Pell, who had known Wren's father. He examined Ash for a long time on the rug in the back room. He felt the back leg. He looked at the eyes. He listened to the chest with a stethoscope. When he was done, he sat back on his heels, and he was quiet for a while. He told Wren that this animal should not be alive. He told her that an animal in this condition, with these injuries, with this much weight loss, did not recover. He told her that he had been a vet for 31 years, and he had no clinical explanation for what he was looking at. Wren told him the explanation. She said it quietly. She told him that her father used to say that wild animals didn't fear humans. They feared sudden movement. They feared loud voices. They feared being looked at too long. She said Ash had been in a cage for who knew how long, with all 3 of those things happening to him every day. She said all she had done was sit down 10 feet away and be quiet. She said it wasn't a miracle. She said it was just the first time anybody had given him the option to stay. Dr. Pell did not say anything to that. He nodded once. He packed up his bag. He left without taking any payment. Ash lived the rest of that summer in the back room. By autumn, he was walking the yard with a limp. By winter, he was following Wren to the mailbox. He never grew large again. He never grew strong again. He kept the limp the rest of his life. But he was quiet and he was watchful, and he stood at the door whenever someone he didn't know pulled up the drive, and he never barked. Not once. He didn't need to. Hattie's medicine got handled. Eli helped Wren get a Saturday job stocking shelves at the feed store, the same feed store where Tully used to lean against the wall. The owner of the feed store had heard the whole story. He paid her $2 an hour, which was more than Saturday work paid, and he asked no questions about it. Hattie's hand stopped shaking by the end of October. She lived another 9 years. She lived long enough to see Wren turn 21. She lived long enough to see Wren leave for veterinary school on a scholarship. Ash was buried under the oak tree at the edge of the back pasture in the spring of Wren's 17th year. He had lived 4.5 years longer than Dr. Pell had said he had any business living. Wren put the cage hinges in the ground with him. Just the hinges. The rest of the cage had been broken up and burned years before. The $5 bills were never spent. Hattie had taken them out of the wagon the morning after the worst night of their lives, and she had pressed them flat in a book of Psalms, and they sat in that book on the kitchen shelf for the rest of her life. They are still there. If you ever drive past a leaning farmhouse 3 miles out of any small town in this country, and you see a girl walking the back fence with an old gray dog at her side, and the dog moves a little slower than the others, and the dog watches you a little longer than the others, and the dog never takes his eyes off the girl beside him. Slow down. That dog was given 7 days to live once. He took every one of them. And then he took 1,000 more. And the only person who ever understood why was the one who didn't try to save him. She just sat 10 feet away. And waited.